everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Francis and Nate, and special guest star Sam Knight. We brought Sam on not to talk about leftist politics, but to talk about gardening. No politics today. Politics free. No, I'm fucking with you. Sam, how are you doing today?
Not bad, not bad. I am getting the vegetable garden started early this year, unironically.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I need to germinate some plants. I got to have full on old man experience that I tweaked my back hard enough that I basically couldn't do shit for a couple of days, and so like lost some prime germinating time. But it's also still kind of cold and shitty here. Like it's not really getting above say 55 Fahrenheit right now. So just sort of like. It's England. It's always kind of mild and generally shitty. So, I envy people who have long growing seasons who can just overload their neighbors with like grocery bags full of cucumbers at the end of the season because shit grows so long there.
We had a good tomato growing season last year, and I'm hoping to replicate that this year. Having a bit of trouble this year. I think I got a little cocky and switched up my germination strategy, and it's not going as well as I would like, but there's still a lot of time. I got started earlier this year than I did last year. So last year, I basically started about the equivalent of a week from now. And this year, I started germinating some stuff in late January. And we really only have one south-facing window that gets any sunlight. So, yeah, I don't know. Knock on wood.
My hope this year is we're going to start doing a vining stuff up our south wall to hopefully cut down on our energy consumption over the summer, because we've got a wall that just gets full on sun on the south for like in the summer, basically all day, 10 o'clock until whenever the sun goes down. So hoping to do that hippie bullshit where I can, cut down on my energy bills by, growing plants all over the place. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. I have a south-facing wall like that too, but basically it doesn't really get sun anytime besides like, let's say May to October-ish. So I put a tent garden thing there to try to prolong the life of the hot peppers I was growing, because I like you said, Sam, like I planted mine stuff kind of late. And of course what I discovered was that once it gets past say the mid-autumn, like there's just no direct sunlight on that spot anymore. So that wall has the weird property of being balls hot in summer and cold as shit in the winter. Like it's the absolute opposite of what you want. So and of course my peppers didn't do so well, but the neighborhood cats did decide they loved that garden tent as a place to shit. So needless to say, I've been having a wonderful winter gardening experience, and I'm super excited about warm weather.
I continue to be surprised by the English supremacy for so long, other than colonialism being driven by this place fucking sucks, let's get out of here. And everybody else, like India's like, yeah man, it's cool here, it's warm, we got water, we got our thing going on. What are all these white people doing here? Hey, cool. What are you? Oh, your place sucks, huh? And everything doesn't taste good. Do you want some curry? Oh, you're stabbing me now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, sweet, fuck, they have guns. And then also, if I remember correctly, they completely co-opted like a certain landlord business class of Indian society. They're like, oh, well, surely we can do business with these normal people. Like they won't do anything bad to us. And needless to say, the landlords were wrong. So, Sam, we brought you on because, well, it's the rare instance where it's like you didn't want to be right, but you were right. And now, like, it's not a thing you'd celebrate. It's just more, dealing with the fallout. You told me in an episode in 2019 that your great fear at the beginning of the primary was that liberals would coalesce around Biden because Biden represented like a return to normalcy, in the form of he was Obama's vice president, and he sort of harkens back to a time when this mythical bipartisanship was real, even though it absolutely wasn't. It's really stupid to even believe that's possible. The only time there was bipartisanship was when they had fucking segregation for some reason. And the fact of the matter is Biden won the primary through some shit. He also then won the presidential election. And we are watching how does one describe this? The immediate turnaround to normalizing the stuff that we were told, don't normalize this, Trump is a dictator. And the same things that were like the manifest bad conditions with regard to stuff like immigration, deportations, children held at the border, things like universal health care, Medicare for all, $15 an hour minimum wage, all these things have suddenly no longer been priorities, are no longer allowed to happen. And instead, the full-on blue wave boomer nostalgia stuff is just into overdrive. So I've talked a lot there, Sam. I was wondering what your thoughts were on being right and the overall situation.
Sam, is it possible to love Biden too much? Is the real question here.
Well, I have to say that despite the fact that I was regrettably correct, I think that there is some cause for hope in that. I guess the main thing that one can point to is that we are not sort of reverting to a miserly austerity regime as we were under Obama. Biden is not bringing in people like Tim Geithner and Larry Summers and such. I mean, there are some ghoulish people in the administration, of course, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's evidence that all this organizing and demonstrating and everything else that people have been doing for the past 10 years, from Occupy Wall Street to Black Lives Matter to the Sanders campaign, it might be starting to pay off. And, the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, has already passed the House. Basically, an equivalent bill was promised under the Obama administration, the Employee Free Choice Act, and it never even got a vote in the House. And you're hearing serious talk about trying to kill the filibuster, but yeah, it is not looking good on many fronts.
Yeah, I mean, the thought had crossed my mind that a good example of this would be for instance, you live in Cori Bush's district, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, so situations like that where you were actually seeing successful primary challenges from the left. You were seeing, as I understand it, the Democrats, the DNC, has ended their blacklist or plans to end their blacklist, or at least making this motion like they're going to stop blacklisting any firms that work with primary challengers, which was hilarious in the sense that it only applied to, I wouldn't even say progressive, but challenges from the left. Basically, if you were the whatever, Ghoul.com that fucking worked for Joe Kennedy's campaign to try and to unseat a left-ish Democratic senator in Massachusetts, then you were fine. You were good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
we don't mind that. And these it's incredible to listen to Democrats talk about, wanting to make sure everybody gets to vote. But as soon as, didn't Hillary tell us to go run for something? Why are we being punished to go run for something? God damn it. I'm just doing what Queen Hillary told me to do.
Obama at the convention saying, "Don't boo, vote." Like, I don't even get how that made sense. How does that make sense?
Well, also, it's like, yes, I would love if people could vote. There's this thing called the Republicans, and they're kind of trying to make it illegal to vote if you're not white, especially in the South. They have formed for this, weirdly, and it does definitely looks like if you don't pass a bill while you have the ability, like fucking post haste, you're going to see just full on, PW Botha apartheid shit in states like Georgia. And I don't know. I mean, for me, I look at it that I agree with you, Sam, that there have been pleasant surprises and there have been these indications that maybe I'll contrast it with what's going on here in Britain, where, you had a popular policy agenda under Corbyn. It was overwhelmingly popular. However, Corbyn was just monstered in the press. And I think my take is that the big death knell of Labour under Corbyn was the fact that they moved towards a second referendum vote, because that wound up, basically it was like, well, you're going to lose seats in your traditional heartlands because those places all voted leave. And not only did they do it and lose badly, but the guy who basically strong-armed the party into that second referendum policy is now the Labour Party leader. And we were promised, don't worry, it's going to be the Corbyn manifesto, but more professional and electable. And instead what they've done is it's just full on revanchism, just kicking out as many people as they can from the left, doing things like general meetings for constituency Labour parties and then just leaving it on mute for 9 hours until everyone logs off and then having the vote and fucking voting out all of the left members. I mean, I'm not joking, stuff like that. Just like people showing up to like the leadership elections for their councils and being told like that moment they've been suspended for some bullshit like, oh, you liked a post from the Green Party in 2014, you can't be in the Labour Party anymore. Like that kind of shit, full on revanchism, even to the detriment of like their appeal in the polls and stuff. Now, obviously, like we don't know how that's going to translate into electoral results, but there's local elections coming up in May, and I think Labour's going to fucking get their ass handed to them. So you see this full on revanchism when that wing of the party takes over. Like basically, we don't care if we win. All that matters is destroying the left, banishing them, and making sure that this can never happen again. Whereas the Democrats, what I've noticed is you would think someone like Biden and the people surrounding Biden, considering that he's, in my opinion, slightly not sound of mind, you would think that they would be the full-on Clinton world kind of people who are just like, when you think about what Hillary, the unforced errors from Hillary, stuff like actually no, $10 an hour is a good enough minimum wage. Actually, let's intervene to lower Haiti's minimum wage. Yeah, I'm just going to give speeches at Goldman Sachs for $300,000 a pop, and like so none of that's your business. I'm going to go on record saying we want open borders for capital and not for people. All this stuff, like just unforced errors. All that mentality of just sort of Democrat brain. You would think that was going to come back. But it doesn't look like it has, in a way that like there's some for sure, but it's not. It does strike me, if I'm being optimistic, that they have perhaps learned the lesson that like if you try to be reasonable and appeal to the fucking hall monitors, you will not get anything. Your voters won't care, and the people who you're trying to impress with your conciliatory behavior get their news from frothing psychos, and they will never acknowledge that because like they live in a different reality.
Yeah, I think part of that has to do with the fact that after the Trump era that it's increasingly clear that triangulation is just completely broken. And I mean, you do see some very worrying signs from the Democrats, like, for example, refusing to whip senators like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin over the $15 minimum wage, refusing to take on the Senate parliamentarian, which is kind of like a nothing position at the end of the day, has no actual real power. And just
a job none of us knew existed, but all of a sudden everybody now hates because it turns into another roadblock. You're like, why does this? What? But the more I have gotten into politics, the more I understand anybody who says I'm not into politics. It's like, yeah, me neither. But unfortunately, I know too fucking much now, and I can't unknow any of this stuff without like a severe blow to the head.
Yeah, I mean that really sucks because I mean I feel that too, and that mentality, or not that mentality, that reality of politics being painful and dull and infuriating, that sort of benefits the right and conservatives and reactionaries whose sole goal is to stop any progress from being made.
Yeah, and I think about it too with stuff like the Senate parliamentarian and your point, Francis, that it's like it seems as though at every juncture there's some reason why it can't happen. You think about the public option getting killed in 2010 because Ted Kennedy died, and then Martha Coxley fucking lost to whoever that moron was from
Scott Brown.
From Massachusetts. Scott Brown, yeah, the Trump ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown, who
the dipshit with the truck.
Exactly. Who tried to, as a specific military angle to our show, you may recall that when bin Laden was killed and, Obama had a brief surge in popularity, Scott Brown tried to get the Massachusetts National Guard to give him like a 2-week annual training orders to Afghanistan so he could say that he was there too. And they were like, no, what the fuck are you talking about?
You only need 1 day to get your combat patch. At least that's what all the generals that showed up told us.
Yeah. But I was just thinking about that, in 2010, then Scott Brown, won that seat and they wound up having the vote and they couldn't get the public option through. And, I don't have a lot of faith. I mean, I'm optimistic to some extent because I know that it's something that Biden cares about, but I'm not super optimistic that you can even get a public option through with Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And I mean, for that matter, people like Chris Coons. Like, I just don't think that I don't know. It's frustrating because you realize that without trying to sound too black-pilled, you find so many ways where it feels unavoidable to admit that the Democrats really, really love it when there's this one weird trick that stops them from helping people. Mm. And I don't know if you agree with that, Sam, because I don't know, I'm away from it now. I mean, I'm in a fucking different country, but it does seem like there's always some insurmountable hurdle, and if that hurdle gets cleared, then they just miracle up another one.
Yeah, I think that's largely accurate. I mean, like I said, the parliamentarian issue was like kind of it was blaming the parliamentarian and even to a certain extent blaming Democrats for not leaning on the parliamentarian or firing the parliamentarian or overruling the parliamentarian. All that was kind of like a sideshow because at the end of the day, the real issue was that they weren't whipping Sinema and Manchin. They weren't bringing any pressure on them. At the same time, they were throwing spaghetti at the wall to try to get Neera fucking Tanden confirmed.
Yeah.
Like they were ready to let Lisa Murkowski fucking drill a goddamn hole in Denali to get Neera Tanden of all people.
It really does show like a lack of cohesiveness because Republicans even after Trump lost were scared to say Trump lost because that's just like everybody like getting away from Trump is a slow backing away. Like how do we? And there's so many like Roy Blunt, one of my senators, is retiring. He's not running again. So is my governor, who were both like full on Trump people, but also at the same time are still young enough to continue on, but old enough to be like, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. And that cohesiveness is really something the Democrats could use to be like, we're doing $15 an hour for minimum wage. And then anybody who says, I don't know about that, it's like, cool, we're going to eject you from everything and you can go sit in a fucking corner if you don't get in line. So get the fuck in line. And unfortunately, it's not so much not having the spine to do it because, like you said, Sam, they were ready to do that for Neera Tanden. Yeah. They were ready to, drill a hole in my fucking head for oil to get Neera Tanden in. But when it comes to something that might enrich themselves, it's fine. When it comes to something that might be a public policy that might help us, anybody else, it doesn't work, which is just so like, I don't understand. Like, it's like, do you people know who does the voting? It's everybody. It's all of us. When you make us happy, like Republicans keep saying like, oh, if the Democrats just give everybody free money, people will keep voting for Democrats and they'll stay in power. Yes, correct. That's what
do that.
What do you think taking money away from me and making me poor is going to make me not like? I don't understand what the thought process is behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, Democrats love to talk out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to money in politics. On one hand, they bash the Citizens United ruling and campaign finance deregulation. On the other hand, they fucking rake in truckloads of money from rich dicks all the time. So I think like part of it is like at the end of the day, they're a party of the donor class. They're a party of capital. And I mean, that's what it really comes down to. And I think we might see a tipping point here with the PRO Act, if that can get passed. And, it's possible that we'll see movement on the filibuster because of HR 1, and maybe the PRO Act can also get slipped through the back door. But I mean, the vote count right now in the Senate doesn't look too great. I mean, last I checked, Mark Warner, senator from Virginia, which is now deep blue, he is not on board with the PRO Act, which is,
fucking ludicrous.
Yeah, parody redacted.
Right. like literally the coal country, and you don't want to allow unions, which is also a strange thing in Missouri, because Missouri is very pro-union, and we always vote down right to work, no matter how much our senators and governors love it. But we're also very deep red. We're like 20 points in for Donald Trump. In the last 16 points in 2016 and 20 points in 2020. So we are full on red.
Whoa,
we do
I didn't realize it went up in Missouri.
Oh, bro, we are
fucking hell,
look,
man.
I had to drive down to Kennett, Missouri, which is 3 hours south of me, to get my first vaccination shot. So I had to go down to the fucking boot heel. And it is driving down there. It is Trump signs the whole way. It's Trump signs and anti-abortion signs, and slowly making its way in are cannabis dispensary signs. So,
Nice.
There's a little progress down Highway 55. It's like, okay, yes. Oh, a beating heart at 18 days, blah, blah, blah. Yes, Trump Pence. Ooh, new cannabis store. All right. What do you guys got?
I mean, and then that's another perfect example of something like Democrats right now could be going whole hog on cannabis legalization on the national level. And
it pulls like what, 70, 80% in favor.
Right.
Yeah, like it's I was thinking about that too, Sam, because that was a point. Like they, even on the platform at the convention in 2020, like they voted it down despite the fact like this is such a blowout issue. Like it genuinely pulls like
nobody hates it. Nobody hates it except dumb people.
I think like every referendum in the past decade at least, probably further than that. I mean, I remember DC decriminalized medical marijuana in the 90s, in the late 90s, but DC obviously is probably the most left-leaning jurisdiction in the country.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is really an open goal.
One of the things that really surprised me about it too was watching how, like, even I'll give you an example. I want to transition to talking about the sort of blue MAGA shit, which I realize is kind of a crude expression, but I do think it expresses a certain kind of mentality. And I want to start by talking about Andrew Cuomo. And I feel like one of the things about Cuomo was, if you look at, for example, how much of an obvious open goal, like you just said, medical marijuana or legalizing recreational marijuana is. And then you look at what they did in New York, where they made medical marijuana almost impossible to get. You can't buy flowers. You can only buy concentrates. You can only get them for a very small number of conditions. Doctors have to get certified to be able to prescribe it. Like, if I remember correctly, there was in the 5 boroughs of New York City, there was 1 dispensary in the Bronx. So for a city of something like 8 million people and a metro area of 20 million people, you basically had 1 store and almost no way to get it prescribed. And even now, Cuomo, under the gun for all of his sexual harassment, is trying to, as I understand it, speed through something to legalize marijuana, but he still wants to include a clause that gives the cops probable cause to search people if they smell marijuana. And it's but it's fucking legal. If you legalize it, but you realize that mentality, they can never let go of the thing that they, that sort of trapped in the 90s, cut everything, means test everything, triangulate everything.
Pro cop,
to the point where it's just, you're chasing your own tail. And if you
let me tell you something insane. So one of the guns that I own is this little tube fed 22 that I bought for $150 at an antique mall down Highway 44. I simply had to go. I saw it. I said, wow, is that a real gun? And they're like, yes. I had to show an ID, and I did not have to do a background check because it's Missouri. You don't actually have to do background checks if you're doing a person-to-person transfer. So if one of you guys came to Missouri, I could sell you one of my guns. Don't need to write anything down. I just need to hand you a gun and you give me money. Now to get medical marijuana, holy fucking shit. I started doing the whole thing to get medical marijuana. I have to have so much, back stuff with the doctor to say that I'm having this problem, that problem, or whatever. It's just, and even when I do, it's still cheaper for me to get it off of my dealer, who is a guy who just gets cartridges and sells them. to his friends. Like that's the only. It's ridiculously easy in Missouri for me to get a gun, but man, did Missouri drag its feet. When we voted for medical marijuana, Missouri dragged its feet for like a year to allow it to happen. It's like I wouldn't mind conservatism if it was a coherent ideology. Like if you say that you don't want big government in your shit, fine, cool. Guns are easy to get. Weed should be easy to get too. Why is it not?
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest complaint with left and right at this point in time is that there is no coherence in when you say, well, we don't like big government or we want to help people. It's like, okay, but you do like big government because now it's ridiculously difficult for me to get, a fucking plant. And you do hate the people because you can't even give me $15 an hour when you haven't raised minimum wage in a while. So who the fuck gives a shit about any of us?
I feel like the only thing I would say in objection to that, Francis, would be that I would be like, yeah, I mean, I would say my issue with right as expressed by the Republicans and left as expressed by the Democratic Party. But like the Democratic Party basically is just a second right-wing party. And it drives me fucking nuts. Party. But Sam, I was wondering like your take on some of this stuff, like in the sense of, I mean, yeah, DC, if I understand it, like it's basically, it's not legal like to buy in dispensaries, but you can grow your own and trade plants and stuff like that. Is that the case?
So, the law in DC, yeah, basically Congress, because we're a special jurisdiction, Congress has control over our laws. So when we legalized recreational use, they saw to it that we weren't able to actually regulate it. Now, having said that, there are literally dispensaries all over the city and no one gives a shit. So it's actually this kind of cool gray market where it's sort of like live and let live. And, you can order all kinds of weed to your house, etc. Now and you can grow it too. You can grow up to 12 plants, 6 of them flowering, I believe, is the limits on a household. Now that said, it's obviously not an ideal situation because at the end of the day, if the cops want to harass you, shut down your store, bust you for distribution, they can still do that. And like I said, it's not ideal. They're trying to change it, but it's much, much better than the situation in Missouri.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't been back to New York since 2019, but I didn't notice any change there. Whereas, like, I'm always reminded of how much DC gets a bad rap because of like the awful sides of it, but it's actually a fucking cool ass place to live.
If you stay out of downtown, if you stay out of like the lanyard areas and the ladder climbing dipshit areas, it's kind of chill.
Yeah, so I was going to bring it back, I guess, to like now that we're in, an era, there's probably, realistically speaking, a rare moment of total control of all parts of government besides the Supreme Court for the Democrats. There seems to be a reappraisal of the things that people were really upset about under Trump. And I think that's almost to the point of it being a cliche to bring up the detention facilities on the border.
Yeah.
Not that the situation is cliche, but rather that like it was talked about so much and then it was dropped like a fucking hot potato immediately upon Biden assuming office. And I notice online and, in the sort of messaging talking points on the news, a profound defensiveness against any kind of criticism of that. And people sometimes call it blue MAGA, or they call it, a variety of things related to Twitter. But I'm wondering, like, have you perceived any, I don't know, change in attitudes since you're around a lot of people who are dialed into politics? Like, do you feel like that's an online phenomenon, or do you feel like there really is a sort of just denialism in the air?
Well, I mean, it's a little hard for me to fully gauge that in a time of social distancing. But there is definitely, I would say, I mean, like, online isn't just online, of course. It certainly does reflect real life. If it didn't, Donald Trump wouldn't have ever been president, because we all remember his Twitter account. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, comes down to aesthetics and style and rhetoric. And, liberals will say, well, these aren't cages. These are just trailers with bars on them. And sort of softening Trump talking points. Like, what else are we supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe fucking put them on buses and send them to foster homes until they find, a place to live.
It's and I think my biggest issue among all of that was, the kids in cages thing was such a, it came from the Obama era into the Trump era and it is once again all just symptoms of a disease that is, American globalism and going around and fucking up everybody else's country and then being aghast that anybody would say, we want to come. Well, you fucked us up. So can we come to your house? And it's like, no, you can't do that. And we're going to, there is no simple answer to the people coming to the border other than, I don't know, just fucking take 20 minutes to interview them and issue them a fucking social security number and tell them to go out there and start paying some taxes. Like it's real easy. We're not fucking and keeping our birth rate up. So we got to start bringing some taxpayers in and one way or the other.
And the thing about and this was pointed out during the Trump administration at the time is that certain liberals would be sharing pictures of cages and whoops, they're actually from 2014. And, at the time, Obama and his secretary of DHS, Jay Johnson, and Hillary Clinton repeated this talking point during one of the debates, which is that, well, we need to deter them from coming. It's a dangerous journey. We need to deter them from coming. Well, they're fucking coming anyway. And that is
right.
That
Hillary
was
Clinton
what Trump's, but that was what Trump was justifying his whole zero tolerance policy with. And so like Blue MAGA, yes, there is a direct line from Obama to Trump and to Biden. And I mean, similarly with some of the other issues, I think like because of the organizing and outrage around this issue, like it might not end up as bad as things ended up under the Obama administration. But right now, it's pretty fucking grim. I mean, Sunday, CBS News has been doing good reporting on this issue. They said that Sunday there were something like 4,200 unaccompanied minors in CBP detention, and that about 3,000 of them had been in detention for longer than 72 hours, which is the limit under law. Today, right before this interview, I just checked, and CBS News said that there are like over 10,000 kids now in detention. And I mean, some of this is the administration gets to use the pandemic as an excuse because unaccompanied children are really like the only ones they are letting over the border right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this too, that what got me was there, as I understand it, prior to the Obama administration, or maybe it was prior to George W. Bush, the policy was typically like if people got caught, undocumented in America, under normal circumstances, you would be given like a court date, but you were released. Yeah. And they started rounding people up and holding them in detention. And, as I understand it, like the figures that made no sense other than to be like performative, because it was in like the 90-something percentile of people who would show up to their court dates. Like it wasn't as if there was some crisis of people skipping their court dates. Like there was absolute compliance.
Yes.
And yet they did it anyway. I feel like, to show off that they were tough on immigration. But back to your point, Francis, like another thing I would say too, is that it feels to me like a lot of this is just an unwillingness to ever sign your name on anything about addressing how bad America's immigration policies are and how everyone says, oh, just do it the legal way. And it's like doing it the legal way requires you to get on a waiting list that's 21 years long if you're from Mexico or the Philippines. I don't know how long it is from Central American countries where a lot of unaccompanied minors are coming from, like Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua. But like, it's not... I can't imagine that it's like a matter of months versus 21 years. And the last time there was anything even close to amnesty was under Reagan, and it was not particularly generous. A lot of people wound up running afoul of it because they had gotten I believe even misdemeanor arrests for things. There was, however, an amnesty. It's just that but the last time that happened was literally, if I understand it, was in the second Reagan administration. So getting close to 40 years ago. And it's like, we haven't really addressed this issue. And we wonder why people are showing up. And it's like, well, I mean, let's be perfectly honest. The big one is climate change, and Americans fucking love cocaine, and that is causing instability in these countries, and people are leaving because they don't want to fucking die. And in the case of Honduras, right? It's particularly pernicious because it is like a failing state that is being run by a guy who's in power because of a coup that we legitimized. We absolutely legitimized. And not only that, but there's reporting on this from just last week. Just last week, federal prosecutors are increasingly tying the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, to fucking drug trafficking. So I don't know if we've ever discussed this in detail, Sam, but I got randomly assigned orders to Honduras in 2010. So it was a year after the coup, and went down there, and basically my big takeaway from it was the entirety of the Honduran state is complicit in the drug trade, whether it's via threat of violence or because of the money that they make doing it. But the big reason why, in my experience, what happened is they during the coup, they basically stopped really caring. And by the time that the government more or less was like, okay, so what are all of our arrayed forces doing across the country? Those folks had supplanted their incomes with coke money, with airstrips and water drops and stuff like that, or submersibles. Less so on the Pacific side, because the Pacific coast of Honduras is really small, but on the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast, massively. And so places like San Pedro Sula have pretty much close to the highest murder rates in the world. Cities like Tegucigalpa also. These are basically marshalling grounds at this point for drugs destined for America. And if you're
podcast
young,
powder.
Yeah, exactly. And if you aren't rich enough to live in a gated compound in, Tegucigalpa or Comayagua or San Pedro Sula, and you have to go out on the street and earn a living and live your life, the threat of violence is so omnipresent. I was never one of these people who was secure our borders kind of shit, even when I was sort of like a dipshit libertarian when I was a teenager. But going there and experiencing it, you're like, Jesus, if this was the conditions you were facing if this is how you grew up, and the option was you could get away from this by going north, I feel like it's pretty obvious why people would, because, it's a risk, but you also, it's staying put's a risk. And that unwillingness to address that, the idea of being like, oh, well, we need to deter them and we need to make sure they know, it's not allowed, and we're going to wag a finger and then put you in a fucking concentration camp. If you know the particulars of it, then I don't know, without trying to sound like a fucking moralist, you get really disgusted by American immigration policy and the drug trade. Quite frankly, it's just when you see that stuff, in my case, taking a bus from Comayagua to Tegucigalpa and be like, oh yeah, we're going through a military checkpoint because literally on the side of the road in the ditch are a bunch of murdered people who drug traffickers killed. You start to be like, this is fucking real, and this is people's lives, and there's a reason why they want to get away from this.
I was there, Nate. I was there in 2008. Before the coup, but also at one point in time, I didn't get to go to Tegucigalpa. And while I was trying to remember when I was there, but when I was in Honduras, there's a big airplane crash at the Tegucigalpa airport. So I can now put it at 2008. But I mean, when we went to whatever the Honduran KFC was, there's still guards outside with AK-47s, because any place that had money, just cash registers, needed a literal armed guard. So, I mean, it was gnarly before, because before the coup, but
you had a huge hurricane that smashed up all the infrastructure in 1998, and then you had another tropical storm that did the same thing in 2008, and so it's just and
then there was another one at the end of last year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's huge droughts, if I understand it, in Guatemala as well. And obviously, Guatemala is like still reeling from 30 odd years of civil war that we completely instigated and also funded. And so I didn't want to cut you off, Sam. I know you had a response to that discussion previously, but yeah, I mean, like, I just that's one of those things where I just if I start talking about it in detail, you just get angrier and angrier because, you know, it just gets turned into this abstraction when it's discussed in policy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there are 2 points to make on that. One is that it shows the need to just legalize all drugs because, you know, you're creating the conditions for these violent black markets to rise. And the other point I'd like to make is that I don't know exactly how to say this because it just makes me so infuriated. But when you contrast the way that American politicians talk about people fleeing from the Northern Triangle versus people leaving, you know, Venezuela and Cuba, you know, it just, I mean, it's so obvious that all they care about is eternal right-wing dominance.
Well, I think about it too with the way it is in the United Kingdom as well, with the way that they, you know, are willing to basically boil their own piss and drink it to own the immigrants, and you know, it's like reality TV having fucking, you know, interceptor boats in the English Channel to harass refugees who are trying to claim asylum in the United Kingdom. People from, you know, countries the UK has helped destabilize and destroy, places like Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, versus the fact that they are basically creating conditions for. And I mean, I don't blame the people who are trying to get out, but it's just it's very striking, the contrast. They are creating conditions right now in law to make it almost instantaneous for Hong Kong citizens who have a certain amount of money to be granted indefinite leave to remain, like the British equivalent of a green card, almost immediately and at extremely reduced cost. Whereas everybody else who immigrates from any other country, regardless, has to pay a huge amount of money. It takes forever. It's really sort of ill-defined and uncertain. And the Home Office basically makes like a 92% profit. Like they charge you, you know, thousands of pounds for a visa when their administrative cost is like a couple hundred, and it's just like, sweet. So is that funding more go home vans and fucking migrant patrol boats? You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's so if the issue is immigration, if you're trying to stake this right-wing government claim that like, oh, we don't have enough jobs and space here, then it's like, but yeah, we'll absolutely open the door for people that we think are going to bring money and are going to vote Tory, but people who are basically actually fleeing for their lives, have to be harassed and put in like old military barracks that are full of asbestos. You know, and I feel the same way, like what you said about immigration in America, that if somebody, you know, flees Cuba or Venezuela, then they're basically, the argument is, no, we need more of these people to show that socialism is bad. Yeah. But if people flee the exact same or worse conditions in a country like Honduras, you know, in a country where, when I was there, I'm not joking, one of the people who worked on the base got murdered for like a $20 cell phone. Someone just hacked him with a machete. An American guy similarly tried to fight off an attacker who was trying to steal his BlackBerry and got hit in the leg with a machete and wound up getting like 75 stitches. Like, it's so unbelievably poor. And because of that, the level of violence is just omnipresent. And I mean, and San Salvador, in El Salvador, is worse. I mean, it's San Salvador. We stayed at a Air Force base, slightly outside of the city center, and they basically told us like, yeah, just understand that you can't go out of this base. We've had soldiers who are assigned to this base who are Salvadorian get murdered right outside for like their phones or their backpacks or something. Like, it's genuinely, if you get on a bus, people will get on the bus and rob you at gunpoint. Like, it's the level of violence that people are facing on a daily basis is just so extreme. And, you know, that people are, the policy or the sort of talking point approach to that is just to say, oh well, they should just deal with it. They shouldn't come to America. Like, no, see, that's wrong.
Stay at home and fix your own country.
And then if you go and you look at the fucking comment section on like the New York Times, which I do out of masochism, sometimes people will be like, well, actually, we need to make sure that like we give these countries birth control. I'm not joking.
But you know what? We can't leave Afghanistan because of the girls and the women. Like we have such a weird like thing that, and which is immediately just you don't care about girls and women. If you did, you'd be pro immigration because that's the.
If you're pro girls and women in Afghanistan, you should end the troop presence there that is causing a fucking endless civil war that is causing the overwhelming majority of casualties in that conflict are civilians, and it's just like, yeah, it's mind numbing. But Sam, I wanted to give you a chance to react to this or to anything that we've talked about so far before we preview our bonus episode for the week.
Just that the situation of El Salvador is particularly grim because a lot of the gang violence in El Salvador comes from MS-13, which was started by Salvadorans who fled the civil war, ended up in LA, and then were deported back to El Salvador.
Yeah.
And obviously the options were limited for what they could do, as you heard, and it seems to be like the only solution that the U.S. has is just like deport, and that will. We've seen it already. It doesn't. It makes things worse.
Yeah, and I guess I appreciated. You bringing up the point that there are sort of reasons to be optimistic about some changes, some perceptible differences between Obama and Biden, but that, like you said, them going fucking to the wall hard as they can to try to get Neera Tanden as the OMB director, strikes me as, well, maybe evidence that a lot of the things that we didn't want to be right about, but were right about in 2009 and 2013 and certainly in the 2016 campaign, those problems haven't really been addressed. And I mean, laughing, but also basically wanting to cry when you're like, damn, the given the whole, wave phenomenon and the crisis that Trump created, it's weird how the Democrats didn't do very well in their congressional races. Who the fuck was in charge of that? You're like, oh wait, it was Robbie Mook. It's just like that stuff. You're like, I don't know if change is going to come fast enough to stop what I feel like is going to be the true meltdown, crazy response that the Republicans are fomenting, in their heartlands right now. And so I don't know, like you've got a closer eye on it than either of us do. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts for our audience who at times wants to be optimistic, but also like doesn't want to lie to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that like we have the conditions to start to make things better, but can we do it fast enough? But it is a hard analysis to make because it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you say enough times that like we're doomed, what do we do? Like people are just going to switch off because who wants to push that boulder up the hill? Yeah.
Well, Sam, I would like you to plug your shows for our audience if you could, because I know you've got a lot of stuff going on between the District Sentinel and Means TV morning news.
Hardest working man on the left. Well, one of them.
So, I'm part of a 2-person co-op, news co-op with Sam Sachs called the District Sentinel. You can follow it on Twitter at the DC Sentinel. Right now, we are putting out one episode a week and also a newsletter and some unlocked interview content on our SoundCloud channel. But if you want to check us out, see what we're like, patreon.com/District Sentinel. Also, districtsentinel.substack.com or whatever the Substack URL is. That's free of charge. And I am I was co-hosting Means Morning News, but TV journalism is like hosting a TV show I found it didn't really agree with me. But I am still doing segments for Means Morning News, and I will be doing one this week. And Means.tv is the URL. And I think our Twitter account is at MMN on Means TV.
We'll have all of that stuff in the show notes for people.
Hell yeah.
I understand you got so much stuff that it's hard to keep track of it.
I've also been doing freelancing mostly at this point. Some stuff has been coming out on truthout.org. I should be having a piece come out soon about a particularly fucked up Supreme Court case that is oral arguments are next week.
All right, well, we'll look forward to that. And Sam, thank you very much for making time. We're going to roll a little bit of our bonus episode for the week, which you can access on Patreon. There will be a link in the show notes as well, in which we have a joint episode with the cast of the Well, There's Your Problem podcast on the topic of the M2 Bradley and how it came to be and why it's such a giant clown car. I will play a little bit of that. And if this sounds interesting to you at all, then you can find the link to it in the show notes to get it on Patreon.
So we got to talk about the Chad to the M113's Virgin. Next slide, please. It's a BMP.
Yes.
Here we are. What the Bradley should have been.
Yeah. And what the Bradley was intended to be is we move away from the armored personnel carrier type of thing where it's like it's a taxi, right? It's an Uber to the battlefield to it's an infantry fighting vehicle. It fights on its own. It fits an infantry squad in the back, and then it's got a turret, it's got a big gun, it's got a fucking missile launcher.
Poking out the front.
Oh yeah, they're just chilling, just hanging out.
Hey guys,
I believe that's probably the driver, because with these vehicles, invariably the driver is in like massage bed seat, lying down, having to fucking pull levers left and right. It's the weirdest configuration. Friend of the shows, plural shows, Joe Kasabian, host of Lions Led by Donkeys, was a tanker, and I believe he was a driver at one point. And Joe is like 6'3", and it's just like, imagine this disgusting, huge Armenian inside trying to pilot this tank in this little fucking clown seat in the car. And also, like, it's incredibly hot in those things. Yeah. And he was tearing a tank around fucking Fort Hood, Texas, and then Afghanistan.
There's a huge problem with the BMP, though, which is that it's very, very good, and it's also Russian. And, like...
we're supposed to be... we're the ones fighting this very good thing.
Yeah.
So anytime something good is on it, it's bad.
That's right. We got to have one of those for like the forces of democracy. Next slide, please.
Yes.
It's Omar Bradley, famously racist. Man.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did just read an anecdote about him, which was that he was coming back to the lines from somewhere and was detained as a possible spy because a person, I guess the guard, asked him, what's the capital of Illinois? And he correctly said Springfield, and the guard thought it was Chicago. So Omar Bradley was detained during World War II by his own army.
Discrimination against nerds. So
he was from like Nebraska or something. He was like full on Great Plains guy. But yeah, he they named the ugly tank after him.
Yep.
This is why I've always told my wife and my friends and everything, like when I went to Iraq, I said, I don't care if I die, I don't care if it's all heroic and shit. Do not let the army name a goddamn thing after me. Do not let them put, because there's a huge chance it's going to be a gigantic piece of shit that soldiers are going to hate. Like if you go to any military base and you go to shooting ranges, the shooting ranges are all like named after generals or soldiers or like people who have died. They're just like, I don't know who died, who's got a fucking Bronze Star with Valor. Throw his name on, shooting, the lane number 9 or something. And so invariably, you just have people who are just like, oh, I got to go to the fucking Francis shooting range again.
The Francis Horton dining facility.
The Francis Horton Masturbatorium.
Here's the thing.
The lower your rank, the less important the range is. So like for some reason they decided that one of the warrior tasks and drills is setting up a claymore completely naked, and they called that Horton range. So it's like, fuck. Shit, I don't want to go to Horton Range. Fuck.
Well, also when I was, and the time that I like really that struck this home, and like I need to tell people this so that it never happens, is I was in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, going through a side gate, and it was a side entry control point for like for the tactical vehicles, our Humvees and shit, and deliveries. And it was named after a PFC who died in Iraq in 2006. It's like, I never want to be memorialized this way. I never want to be like, yeah, go through the Horton Gate. It's over there. You got to follow the cow truck over through Horton Gate.
The main drag of Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan is named after a specialist named Jason Disney, who died getting crushed by a piece of equipment. And it's like, it's just, so it's Disney Drive, and everyone assumes it's for Disney movies for some reason, or that like it's a big clown show of, fucking dancing hippos from Disney's Fantasia.
You got crushed by a shipping container, right?
And it's just, yeah, something like that. And it just gets me because I always think like,
just checking Twitter.
Literally, it's one step removed from like, in that ad of the classified obituary, like in loving memory of Steve Mike Detmer killed by a bowling ball on January 1st, 1985. Like it's basically that, but more solemn and military.
So we got a capitalist BMP here on the right, pointing at Omar. It's an XM723, and it looks kind of nice. I think it looks.
Yeah, it looks
like
BMP-ish.
Yeah, kind of low to the ground, agile.
It looks like an armored Lamborghini Countach, which I really like.
Yeah. And it's sort of, it looks fast and looks subtle, and somebody thinks, hey, maybe we can use this for reconnaissance as well as troop carrying, because you use BMPs for that. It's probably fine. Next slide, please. I love the chart that I put on this one.
Jesus Christ, Alice.
It's the Defense Acquisition Management Framework. What's confusing about the Defense Acquisition Management Framework?
I'm literally first live show in Scotland is actually just going to be me fighting you.
It's really funny, those firing ports, those weapons, the port firing weapon. I had forgotten all about those. But yeah, you see those on the right, that looks like an M16 A2 or an A1 with a I can't see exactly, but it doesn't have a stock because it's a port firing weapon. It's meant to be jammed out the port of a Bradley and fired.
Yep.
I like how the plug is hanging there too. It's like you got to unplug the port and jam the specific M16 out the window. Can you even aim, or are you just firing blindly?
It's the port firing weapon, right? I have a whole thing about this because it amuses me so much. Not only does it not have a stock, it doesn't have sights. It's open bolt. It's fully automatic only. In the manual that comes with the Bradley, it says, do not use the port firing weapon detached from the parent vehicle unless it's an emergency. And if it is an emergency, it gives you 4 warnings. It gives you a warning that the muzzle rise will be uncontrollable. It gives you a warning that the barrel collar will become hot to the touch. And it gives you a warning that you have to wear hearing protection and have something to catch the brass in. So this is like, that's my synecdoche for the Bradley, right? Is that like, it's originally designed to work like a BMP. You fit an infantry squad in the back and they can have like firing ports. They can shoot out with a rifle. And it gets, simultaneously, as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the crew compartment gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you can't fire a rifle out of it. And you have to
throw something else in as well, and that is that, please bear in mind, the Bradley was designed before the advent of the kind of body armor that we wear now. It was designed in the era when some people would wear flak jackets, whereas what we wear now is basically an improved flak jacket with ceramic plates in the front, back, and sides. So I'm telling you, you'll wear your equipment vest on top of your body armor. When you have 6 dudes in the back of a Bradley with their full kit to include helmets and body armor and equipment vests, they basically cannot scratch their own nuts. They are so packed in tight. Like you cannot. You can barely fit a squad in these fucking. Like,
you want to know how many people were supposed to get carried as passengers in the XM723?
Oh God! Please tell me it was like
11.
12 in the squad.
It was 11 people.
Shit, fuck! You can barely get a firing team.
Exactly.
You can barely get a fucking firing team inside a Bradley. Like it is so. Oh my God! It's so small. Yeah.
I've been crammed into the back of a lot of MRAPs, but I think the worst was anytime I tried to use a porta potty in my full kit, because like they're not that big to begin with, but then you've got all this body armor and everything. And really, it's like you wonder why they're so gross inside is because you really can't tell where you're pissing. You just have to like
well, yeah,
pull your
especially if
dick
you have
out
the
and hope for your
Kevlar.
best.
If you have the Kevlar dick flap, I can
Yeah,
only
you
imagine
gotta
how
lift
many
the dick
people
flap.
accidentally pissed on their dick flap. This is actually this is a common thing for toilet training in Europe, but in America we don't have a normal dick flap. So for us, the enormous Kevlar triangle hanging down to cover your dick is funny.
Yeah, you have to figure out a place to put the M16 so it doesn't go down into the shitter. You've got to figure out a way to undo your pants, your button fly as well. Find your dick because there's just so much going on down there as is. After you lift up so you got to have one hand holding up the dick flap, one hand holding yourself. You can't see anything because he's been crushed down there, man. He's not coming out for anything. So you're just hoping and praying. And it's like maybe you'll piss on the wall, maybe you'll get it into the hole. Once you start pissing, then you can aim. It's like a tracer round, right? You got to get the first little bit out so you can figure out where you're pointing, and then you adjust fire.
Speaking of, I want to highlight the fucking tow missile launcher that this thing has, because somebody thought, hey, the BMP can kill tanks if it's been a good boy. Why can't we kill tanks with the Bradley? Well, okay, we put a missile launcher on it. Where do we put the missile launcher? There's no room in the turret. There's no room in the crew compartment. Where do we put this thing? And the answer is you bolt it off of one side.
Right.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast everywhere that the podcast is. If you've made it this far, all the links are down below. And for Nate, thank you all, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yep. Take care.